This episode of Slatki Stol is in partnership with and sponsored by Lionheart Pro, catering to all your filming needs.
Everyone's worried about who's going to tell the next person, even when they go, I'm sorry, let's just say it, speaking to a rabbi.
And look at your cousin, he's in dental school. Why aren't you in dental school?
Good for him.
Nobody can play God and be judge.
I think a lot of it's the framing. You know, men don't like to think that they're weak. They don't like to think like we have something wrong with us.
It's at every bris.
It's at every event.
It's at 7:30 in the morning. There's bottles on the tables.
It's over the top, it's over the edge to the point where I'm pushing the people that I really love away. When you're messed up, nothing matters.
The world around you is completely dead. And it's time to stop covering things because this is how we're going to continue to see the intergenerational trauma.
The community overshadows mental health. Agreeers, please step forward.
So first of all, the community definitely overlooks mental health and overshadows it. And it's just really unfortunate and it's really sad that for us to take it seriously and sit down and have conversations, very often terrible things need to happen. Another kid turns to drugs, somebody, God forbid, takes their life. And it's really like sad. And I, as somebody that's a part of the Bukharian community that loves it, I want to see our community take it seriously and do something about it. Something by the community, for the community, which is what you guys are doing, which is amazing. And it's really important that we actually do make this initiative known and get people to take mental health more seriously because, we should be living the best life that we can.
I think when the older generation, when I say older, I mean like the people that immigrated here. My kids would be first generation American, but I'm considered an immigrant. And when we came here, we assimilated. And even our generation kind of grew up under that strict rule because we had such a strong community. And when we first came here, we didn't assimilate right away. We went to school and everyone's speaking English and everyone has, different values, but our community and at home, parents were still speaking in Russian. They actually made it a note, speak in Russian so we don't forget it. Every Friday you come home, Shabbat. It's very, very important that we do this. As our generations now have children, now they're American. Unfortunately, some of the community did not assimilate when it comes to mental health. So they have these ridiculous expectations of, when I was your age, 21, I was already married, I had 3 kids, I went to school on a donkey, you shouldn't complain. It's funny, but when you do that every single day and you completely invalidate what the children here are dealing with, social media, bullying, it's a different world. It doesn't mean that they had it harder. This is a different world. And unfortunately, I do see it every day. I see it with my own kids. And I can speak to it because, like I said, we assimilated, but not all the way. We still hold on to some of those values. But as a nurse, I can tell you right now, our elders really have to start focusing on the anxiety, the depression, because mental health, it's like saying, oh, there are no mental health issues. That's like someone saying, oh, I'm never gonna have a stomachache. I don't have digestive health problems. Mental health is just, it's the embodiment of everything. And I think that, I speak for the people sitting that you agree. Our community has a lot to learn. 4-on-1, would you like some tea?
Slatki Stol, let's do this. All right, so the question is the community. I don't think it's just the community, I think it's everyone. And I also think it's per the individual. We all have to do our part in taking care of ourselves. We can't blame the community, it's not their fault. We're each individuals and we each have to look after ourselves. And sometimes we love the people enough that we want to look after somebody else. But I really, really think it starts with the individual and not the community. And that's why I disagreed.
Interesting factor. I'm gonna jump in here.
Let's go.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate actually too.
I love it.
There's a lot of important points that were mentioned, both from Michael, Mom Yaron, and sorry, Mom Yaron. it's a thing. I can't. And Gabby. I think that. I think what Michael's also saying is factual. It isn't just the community. I think mental health is stigmatized across the board. Mental health is, even the word mental, when you hear the word mental, I think so many times people just take that word and it turns into something completely negative. Mental literally means your mind.
It is a negative word.
But
you look at the concept
because of what they turned it into, right? But it wasn't supposed to be that. I mean, the word actually mental, if you take down the dictionary form of it, means your mind. And mental health means you're taking care of the health of your mind. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. And to also say that we have a problem constantly, look, it's not a problem to have a problem, and we have to start looking at the solutions of things, right? We're going to sit here and pinpoint, we can sit here and point fingers all day long. Yes, there's an immigrant factor here. Yes, there's an education factor here. Yes, there's a lack of understanding. But at the end of the day, it's also a lack of how are we really projecting this information and making sure that the youth understands it, because they're the ones who we need to worry about at this point. I'm not really concerned about the older generation. And I'll tell you, I'm serious. I'll tell you why. Look, they took a step back in time, and I have no idea when they're going to decide to come forward. I really don't. And for us to sit around and wait for that, it's like sitting and saying,
But
okay,
they pass on these generational curses.
So yes, so now that means we need to sit down and talk about educating, right? Educating them so that they have this sensitivity.
Correct. So I think that the biggest piece when we're dealing with, from the community standpoint, and how we want to affect the generation before and then the generation ahead of us, like our kids and our kids' kids, for their future, we do need to have educational conversations surrounding this topic for our community members.
Correct.
Our parents and our foreparents, they do need to understand that their mentality with this particular issue is very skewed. And it's disfavoring, like you said, Esty, it's disfavoring our kids. It's causing for them to have an invalidation in what they're going through, the challenges that they're faced with, the fears that come up in their interactions of the world. And when all of those pieces are brought to the table and it's saying, and it's null and voided,
Right.
a lot of repressed anger, emotional confusion, a state of disorientation and shame.
Right.
The biggest piece here is that shame comes into the picture. And then we have our young kids, like 20-year-olds, 23-year-olds, they lack a sense of purpose. They feel like they don't have that, anything to rise above it. And I think that when we're talking about organizations and how important it is for organizations to have an emphasis on a community level, which is what Yesodot is here to do, we get a lot of backlash.
Right.
We get, we get as if we're imposing on someone's privacy. And I'll tell you this, you do not have to feel like your privacy is being imposed, because we are HIPAA regulated.
Correct.
So everything that is said and is spoken of is confidential.
I think that's a very foreign concept.
And it's foreign, yes, it's a foreign concept to so many of our Bukharian families.
Hi, I'm Ilana Rakhnaev. I'm clinical director of Yesodot, aka Foundations, medical social worker. And I've had many years of experience working in mental health within the community for substance abuse, geriatric and pediatrics community as well, both clinical and non-clinical.
Because everyone's worried about who's going to tell the next person. Even when they go, I'm sorry, let's just say it, if this might digress from the situation, it's a conversation of speaking to a rabbi. Many times you're worried, is this going to leave this room? Who's the rabbi going to share it with? And who might have seen you leave that rabbi's room, because who's sitting in the waiting room now?
Right.
I think why we were saying that it's a community issue is very often, like the points that you mentioned, is like, hearing from our parents, like, how can you go to an outsider and talk to it, and they maybe don't understand what confidentiality is, or maybe they've even had bad experiences and there's shame, like you said. Our parents came sacrificing so much, literally coming here with nothing, creating a life and everything, and like to sit here and maybe look back and say, oh, they didn't do a good job here, they didn't do a good job there, it comes across as like ungrateful. And I understand why people might not want to admit that they have problems, because it's like, yeah, we went through so much, Like,
yeah, and they did, but they were in survival mode.
Yeah.
Right.
And, talking to them, I give them a lot of credit. It's constantly like, we didn't have the luxury to be depressed or anxious. We had 3 children that we needed to bring across state lines with everything we could carry. And it was all about putting food on the table. And the only goal make sure the kids get assimilated into a good family, and let's continue the lineage. So you talked about having a purpose. I think that our community overstresses getting married, building a house, and having children as the only purpose that exists. Yes, it's absolutely important to get married and have children. I will also even say that it's important to get married on time. There's a time frame where in America, unfortunately today, we see a lot of it. We see a lot of youth left, unfortunately, like almost left behind in their 30s, but they don't have an expiration date. We have to stop treating them as such. And I can speak on this, and I got married young. When you said like where our community is at fault, it's the constant pressure. And it's the constant, not only pressure, it's people stepping over their boundaries. They have no lack of, maybe that person doesn't feel comfortable talking about that. Like, oh, when are you having kids? How do you know she didn't have a miscarriage the day before? Imagine how that impacts that girl with that mental health. 100%. So I'm sure you guys will agree in all that. And I know you say that it comes from an individual perspective. I'm just saying that our community does not help. They're not helping. They're not help. Like, you can't turn to them because it's almost like a unified, they're enabling it, absolutely. Hi, I'm Esther Paltielua. I'm a quality assurance nurse. I'm also a content creator, known as MommyRN88 on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. And I'm here to share my views on the mental health issues in our society.
I can't open up to my family members without facing judgment.
So I looked up what the word judgment means, and it's you're passing down punishment. Or you're keeping score. What do judges do? They keep score. And they're evaluating, they're appraising. Great.
I love that.
And I think it's warranted, but if you're gonna judge somebody on the bad, judge them for the good as well. And keep it going. Keep the score going. Don't focus on a game that happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
At all.
It's not gonna happen. I wish we lived in a world like that. And it would be fantastic and idealistic, but it's reality. We all have a score.
Hi everyone, my name is Michael Shimonov, age 37 years old, and I am ready to rock and roll.
It's a social constructed ideology that has been passed from civilization to civilization, from century to century, thinking that that is the way to condemn a person and be warranted right to do so. It is not. Judgment. Nobody can play God and be judge. You can't be judge, executioner, and jury all at the same. And it's not just within our Bukharian community that deals with this. The majority of cultural, ambiguated communities from all races and from all ethnic backgrounds deal with this kind of situation. And that's why the epiphany of social work is that. Do not judge. Be an empath. Go into the other person's shoes. Step into where they're at. And it isn't.
It's not an easy task.
It's not an easy task.
You have to
It
care.
isn't an easy
You have
task.
to
but
care.
you have right. You need to.
So what happened to caring? That's the question.
Human.
Not only that, when I thought of this question, I immediately thought of, it's one thing to even judge, and you shouldn't judge 100%. Your family should be your safe space. Right. These are people that love you and support you and should love you unconditionally. And most of the time, they do. I don't want to make it seem like, but there is a fear, obviously, to come forth to your parents or to come forth to your family members about a problem because of that feeling of shame and judgment. 100%. What I first think of is always the word hypocrisy. Yep. So our community is very famous for like sitting there and telling the youth like what are you doing? Like I'll bring up a very common one with like where there's drug abuse, and I've done some community work with that, and I've spoken to families, and I see the dynamic. Now, as a third party, I don't know anything about these people. I don't care to judge them. I don't know what their last names are. I don't care. And from what I see, and especially after having a few conversations, the father is absolutely like so angry with his child that went and made this mistake. But then when you look at his lifestyle, I'm like, well, you're a raging alcoholic that you have never addressed, but you're angry that your child is an active addiction. Are you going to fix yourself? Obviously, I didn't have that kind of conversation with him, but it boggles the mind when you look how these people, some of them, in broken homes, like they have the audacity to expect their children, what's wrong with you? I gave up everything to come here, but they don't realize, you passed on those traumas. Your child is suffering
We are
because
in trauma mode.
Exactly.
So first of all, I agree with your guys' points. I think it was amazing. And thankfully right now, my family is like incredibly supportive, and I'm so lucky and blessed, and I understand how rare that could be in a Bukharian community. It's not perfect, obviously. Like there are things that if I would say, if for example, I would say I'm not religious anymore, I'm sure there would be people that would flip, but the judgment, I wouldn't say is malicious. And I feel like for me, definitely in a place where I am with my family, it comes from a place of love. And the truth is, it was not always like that. It definitely has evolved. And I think personally,
They've evolved.
So yeah, and I don't want to take all the credit, but I feel like me doing my own work and being able to set my own boundaries and be like, I tell you this because I love you and I want to hear that you care and feel similarly, that you care about me, that went a long way. And having those real conversations is really worth it. And thank God my family wasn't the type of family where I understand there will be toxic, narcissistic people that will be like, I don't care, whatever, blah, blah. Thank God I didn't have that experience. But for sure, having those real conversations, like you could learn to set those new boundaries to have your family like support you in a more loving way instead of the judgment or maliciousness that may have been accustomed.
So I think it's beautiful and amazing that you come from a very supportive family, and I know there are many like that. You're not the only one. I have a very supportive and loving family also, but I do want to mention that there are definitely situations where we will even see a very supporting, loving family member marry into a very toxic family, and from there, that alone can just cause an array of mental health issues. I've seen it. I've seen a lot of divorces. This is why it contributes to a lot of the divorces that we have in the community. So it is very important to have that support. And that's really what I wanted to underline, that it's so important to have a supportive, loving, non-judgmental, unconditional loving family, because we all have mental health problems. And, we also all have egos, but unfortunately we see that in our community, sometimes our egos get the better of us, and it should never be at the expense of our children's mental health. It shouldn't be at the expense of their lives, of their happiness, just to keep up some kind of image. Like, what will people say about me? This is my last name. You are not to embarrass me. People know me. This is all pride and ego. We're all human. You have to let kids make mistakes, and you have to be an open, safe space for them. Because if you're not going to be the safe space for them, what are kids going to end up doing? They go to friends, they go to drugs, they find that bad, they find a way out. They find a way to numb themselves, the wrong influences. So it's we're doing ourselves a disservice when we do that. Like, don't embarrass me, this is my name. When you put that fear into children, and even into young adults, and even into older adults, like, don't do this, don't do that. Like, don't get divorced, for example. Your husband's beating the crap out of you, you can't get divorced. We don't have a divorce in our family. Okay, so you're gonna let her wither away. You're not gonna offer any love and support. And the most common thing I've probably heard is, all right, well, he's not a gambler and he doesn't, notoriously cheat, and you're okay. There are worse cases. That's complete invalidation of what that young girl might be going through.
So let me ask you this. Is that really considered supportive?
No, that's what I'm explaining, that it's under the guise of support.
Like, it's under the guise of support. You just said the right word. It's under the guise of support.
Like, we love you, but don't embarrass me. As long as you don't.
So there's a condition
attached.
That's
what I'm saying. A condition attached.
And so that, in other words, means that there isn't real giving of oneself to each other. It's tit for tat.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's do something and you will be rewarded. Right. Don't do something and you will not reap your reward. You will not seek anything. So that kind of attachments that we create or that we provide to our kids and to our next generation is toxic. Yeah, right. It's that. So again, we're coming back to that same concept. You can have a very supportive family from the outside and have a very toxic family from the outside, but your facades don't always match what's really happening. And that's why psychotherapy is so intrinsic, that you break those away. You get to see that where the crap is and where the honesty is. Breaking down what you're so comfortable with, right. What you've been so attuned to, so conditioned to, is often very scary. Uh-huh. And we're left to constantly go through the same patterns and cycles of maladaptive behavior, even if it's chaos. Right. We love the chaos because we're used to it. Why change that?
Right. So, and that also forms what? Tolerance. There's always this theology of tolerance.
And that's why we have such a big number, and let's be honest, such a big number of domestic violence in our community.
And
across many different ethnic communities, but speaking about the Bukharian community in particular, it's shunned upon. It's okay to tolerate that.
No, it's not.
It's not, but it's okay for a woman to accept that because he's a good dad or because he's wonderful at being a provider.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Also, huge thank you to our sponsor for this portion of today's episode, Mickey Hana. Be sure to use code Slatki Stol for 10% off your next meal. Again, thank you so much for watching today's episode.
Therapy is pointless. Please sit down if you agree. Disagreeers, please sit down.
I mean, I think that's why we're here, to drill the point that therapy is absolutely necessary. Yeah, I think it would be a great thing if we could just go down the table. And I personally have done therapy and many times, and it's been very beneficial. Michael, have you done therapy? Yeah. Have you done therapy? Did you like it?
Yeah, of course.
Did it benefit you?
Absolutely, I'm a therapist.
These two give therapy. Next question.
Everyone's at some point in their life, obviously, you've gone through therapy, and if you haven't, it's time to try it.
I did want to make one mention. Everyone's always like, oh, you need help, speak to someone, fix this, fix that. I want to put on the table, maybe go as a group.
Group therapy is family
wise.
therapy.
Like, let's go together, because I think you have a problem, you think I have a problem. Well, let's settle it, but let's have someone mediating, let's have a therapist, let's do it together instead of individually, air it out, and work our problems out.
I think we underestimate, and this goes across the board, it's not even about Bukharian, but like brushing problems away just makes everything pile up into a mountain. And it is comfortable sometimes to ignore certain things, but that's why sometimes therapy might be presented to a situation where you've ignored problems for so long that now there's so much resentment, so much animosity, you can't even look at the other person without like screaming at them. And I saw this really powerful saying once that when two people, for example, if it's a married couple, if two people are screaming at each other, it is because they cannot hear each other. They're not connected. They're not.
Hearts are disconnected.
Exactly. So the louder they're screaming, the more disconnected they are. And when you notice like a couple that can speak quietly to each other and it's very like productive, where they're understanding and there's back and forth, you see that they have like almost like this gentle, like connection amongst them. And you see it more or less amongst like an older couple that's been through a lot in their marriage, and they
learned it.
They learned it, exactly, after 30 years, 40 years. So yeah, I think therapy is very powerful, and I think that people shouldn't wait for it to get to that incredibly chaotic and erratic situation where there's so much resentment already and you feel like, oh, like I don't love that person anymore, or whatever. Like that's not the case. You've just internalized a lot of issues and you've refused to talk about them, even though it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about sometimes. Like you have to own sometimes problems that you might be having, or that you have a difficult personality, or that you've done something bad in the past that you need to now work past. So I think I'm very behind therapy. I think therapy is a very powerful tool.
I just want to say that from a psychoeducational standpoint, that in order for psychotherapy to actually be effective, it has to run, if it's for the sake of a family coming to terms with each other, understanding each other, you do have to have a combination of individual sessions and family sessions in order for the therapist to actually mediate, like really what's happening from an individual side, and then what's happening from an inclusive side, right, where when the family dynamics is in place and everybody has a position in their family, related to what their roles are, what their responsibilities are, who negates what. And so all those things can be very vital when it comes to both approaches, right, have to be in the setting. For couples, for instance, it's the same concept. The therapist will say, I need to see you both individually and I need to see you both as a couple.
Exactly.
If there is even a smidge of some sort of going to the conversation of DV, and DV can fall under many different facets.
Yes.
You can have mental abuse, emotional, financial, physical, sexual.
Yep.
If any of those are identified and are hidden through the process of conversation, the therapist will be like, I need to create a safety plan.
Yes.
I need to be able to see what's happening, where the red flags are, how do I identify those, and how do I support my individual who's being the victim into a much more safer environment. Now it's about, we're not going to work on things anymore. We're going to have to get you out of that situation.
But what happens is sometimes they don't want to leave because that happens a lot.
Statistically, it takes 7 to 10 turnarounds for the victim to finally say, yes, I want to go.
What's a turnaround?
Basically, there's a saying like she'll leave 10 times, but she comes back 12.
Exactly. It's a click in the mind that
And it can be like the smallest thing.
It can be the smallest thing.
The smallest thing. He'll put his like chopstick down the wrong way, and she's like, "I'm so done with you." Like it just.
It's just that click.
It doesn't have to be like the beating of a lifetime for her to be like, you know what? It's usually not like that. It's usually too late when, God forbid, like when they don't get out. But it's something that happens that's really small, when it finally just clicks that, you know what? I can't do this to myself and my children anymore. I need a safe space. So
I do want to say this, that in many different relationships, sometimes men are the victim. Okay, I do want to say that it's not always just a woman, man against woman kind of conversation. I've seen it in many times in practice. Dan and I both.
Do you use that word, victim?
I like to say survivor more. I want to use words that have more positive and empowerment tools to it, rather than saying, again, projecting a mindset where the individual feels defeated. Right, yes. We don't want that. Right. So in actuality, our words are very, very, very important, very impactful and crucial. But my statement just now is saying that it's not a man versus a woman issue. You know what I mean? There are men that are also abused. There's men to men that are being abused. There's women to women that are being abused in an intimate partner violence type of situation. And those have to be discussed.
Oh my God, Alana, you just opened up a whole nother Pandora's box.
Within our, you know what? You
on
and I.
Next week's
wait
episode.
a minute. You and I both know, and I think anyone on this, us as people on this panel right now, do know that our community does face that.
Of course,
okay?
it exists.
Of course,
It's
it
not a
exists.
secret.
Of course,
Yeah.
unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
Therapy definitely is scary for many people because when you start to go down that rabbit hole, you start to feel like, okay, everything that I've experienced and the traumas, you feel like you're reliving them. And many times you'll find people leaving therapy smack in the middle at the 4th or 5th session. Literally, after 4 or 5 sessions, they go.
It's because their truths have been released.
Exactly. And it's usually after a certain amount of times that the person experiences the therapy and they feel like, okay, now I feel like I can't I can't face any of these challenges. The truth is really, really scary. And it's like going back to the concept of putting things under the rug, and now that pile is so high and it's a mountain and you're falling off of it.
What do you think about men that think that vulnerability is a weakness and going to therapy would be like a weak act?
That's a very big part of, I think we can say, across the board in most cultures, but if we're talking about the Bukharian community specifically, it's a very big, big part of our societal norm. Mm-hmm. Men don't speak up. They rather go to a bottle, and let's just put it out there, because there are a lot of them who are struggling with alcohol abuse. And that goes way back to our
numb their pain.
Right.
It's like embarrassing for them to admit a weakness. You know what I mean? It's a
It
very
is 100%.
embarrassing thing.
And going back to that concept, actually, now that I remember this, a rabbi speaking up about how this generation currently is suffering and struggling, and they're the ones who need a safe haven and they need therapy because our great-grandparents didn't need therapy. Wrong.
Bogus.
Wrong. Absolutely. That is
bogus.
absolutely false. It is why we are here today experiencing these same exact issues. Intergenerational traumas is the reason why we're seeing what we're seeing and why it's still being hushed and their stigma is very much alive. To say that our great-grandparents didn't experience anything is complete farce. The domestic violence goes back a century ago. The alcohol abuse goes back a century ago. And going back also into the topics of how many things we hear, people that do come through the doors of Yesodot, for example, rape, sodomy, and we're talking about people who are way, way, way into their 40s. And we're also talking about the ones who are not in their 40s, who are in the younger generation too. And it's happening within the community. It's known and it's being covered. And it's time to stop covering things, because this is how we're going to continue to see the intergenerational traumas. If you think that this doesn't affect you just because it's not happening in my backyard, think again.
I think as somebody that works with people, like a misconception I just want to break is that people think therapy is for people that have big problems. You know, like the guy's addicted and suicidal and all sorts of things. And
It's for small stuff too. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's true. You need therapy for sure. But at that point, it's like that person needs so much more than therapy. And it's really the regular challenges that people face, the anxieties, the depressions, the bouts of sadness, just struggling, trying to figure out career, trying to figure out life. Therapy is so useful for that. And I think so many of us are afraid to say, and you also asked about therapy with men. I think a lot of it's the framing. You know, men don't like to think that they're weak. They don't like to think like I have something wrong with us, we have something wrong with us, whatever it is. I think framing it in a way where it's like, hey, this is an improvement thing, get your mind the healthiest it can be the best that you can be. Especially like men need a mentor very often, like having that kind of dynamic where it's like, this is, you know, like I'm learning from this person and I'm growing. That's something very empowering to men, and that's something that, you know, as a person that works with men, that's what I found to be true. And like when you frame it that way, it's a powerful thing and it's very effective. Hi, I'm Gabi Koinov, a proud father, host of the Gabi Koinov podcast, and a private practice owner to help young men, preteens to young adults, live their best life.
People turn to addictive behaviors and substances to handle their mental stressors.
I'll say something really quick on this because I think we touched up on a lot of it, and I think I have a few panelists here that can probably touch up a lot more and a lot heavier. But what I will say is that yes, I agree that is exactly what people do, but I feel like that's part of this like society's problem, that it just seems like that's the only thing that you can do. When the reality is, if you actually look outside of it, there are so many different things that you can do that would help you in such a healthy way. So for example, you know, one person's norm is going to be having a drink every single night after a hard day's work. Unfortunately, that's going to add up, and you're not supposed to be drinking every single night. That can literally turn into addiction. And then there's the other person that says, no, I'm going to go to the gym, release like all that negative energy that is proven to be beneficial, releases endorphins, just every single positive thing that you can imagine. So yes, people do give into pressures by drinking, doing drugs, especially, you know, it's a common thing. We're in New York City, social media glamorizes it, the celebrities glamorize it, Instagram glamorizes it, the party lifestyle, this yacht lifestyle that's fake. It's definitely glamorized, but not everybody goes towards that route.
Just to go back on that, it's not always an addiction of substance, and it's not always an alcohol. There's also eating disorders. Yeah. There's also self-injurious behaviors. There's also a kleptomaniac, right? That's a textbook terminology, but there are so many different aspects and legs, as they can, you know, where we say that it can turn into a negative behavior that you turn to because it's a coping mechanism. What's your coping mechanism? And that's what you start to go to, and it gets deeper and deeper. You fall down that, right, it's a maladaptive behavior. What you basically said, Esther, is that how do we take those negative behaviors and swap them out for positive ones? And that's relearning who you are. Taking away piece by piece of those negative aspects that you've learned, because they're all learned, they're habitual. Of course, then they become behavioral and lifestyle, but that's what it is. How do you take all of that and now slowly peel it away? That's my favorite thing that I always like to say. We're like an onion. And we want to peel back those layers so that we kind of form into a blooming onion, right? And it looks beautiful, it looks like a lotus. My name is Diana Rakhneyev. I've been working in the mental health field for nearly 2 decades now, working with residential settings, programs, clinics, and most recently I've been able to open up our own nonprofit foundation right here in the heart of Forest Hills for our Bukharian community called Yesodot, aka Foundations, where we are here to make sure that our community members have a home away from home, a safe place, a safe haven, to make sure that they don't feel shunned and that the stigma isn't alive. We want to break those barriers, and hopefully today we'll be able to make some kind of an impact with our conversation.
It really upsets me that the Bukharian community glamorizes drinking as much as it does.
It's a problem.
It's at every party. It's at every bris. It's at 7:30 in the morning. There's bottles on the tables. This is what the youth is used to looking at. Growing up, they see it consistently. It's at every party. And yes, we're Jewish. We celebrate. It's we're celebrating life and happiness.
It's also promoting a luxury, if you think about it.
And it does promote a luxury, but unfortunately, it becomes such a normal thing. Like I remember my friends that were American growing up, when they there was times where they either came over to our parties, there was whatever, and they're like, oh my God, like you guys have the bottle on the table. And there's 16-year-olds drinking, and the adults are kind of like, pускай пьет, like it's okay, it's totally normal. Where my American friends were like, you have to be 21 to drink. I mean, obviously I'm speaking of when we were younger, and it's like, but when you actually start thinking about those conversations, our community looks at it as very like nonchalant, and then that turns into something nonchalant, into something deeper. You know, marijuana has become nonchalant across the board for a lot of different, it's become almost like accepted. But when these things start getting abused and they become a lifestyle, they unfortunately lead into very dark, twisted corners, especially for the youth.
Would you want to say, Alana?
I just want to play devil's advocate for a second and say that, you can come from a society and from a community that shuns all of those things. Just to give you an example, the Black and brown communities that are very, very strict, and they have very segregated type of, between the youths and young adults. Everything is very mitigated. For those that are of that kind of communities, they are very tempted to use and abuse substances and other means in order to escape from something.
Right.
When you make it also something that is forbidden,
It's more tempting.
it's more tempting. So there's a double-edged sword here. The extreme poles here, thank you. It's not just about, hey, if it's always in your face, you're still gonna do it, and if it's hidden behind you, you're not gonna do it. I think it comes down to also the temptation, the eager, the willingness, the curiosity. We are humans. And even if someone does have really bad memes, I'm a believer of change. Change is a possibility. Growth with change is a possibility. You need to also be willing to do it. I'll tell every single client and patient of mine, if you're coming to see me, I assess you in your level, in your stage of change first. That's my first thing. Are you coming here to do the work? Because I will not put 100 and you're putting 50. Nobody, it's not gonna work like that. You're coming here, we're gonna work. We're doing it. And we set it up, and it's like putting on brick by brick, layer by layer, foundation to foundation. You can't, and everyone starts somewhere. Some are already ready, and they're like, yeah, I'm with you, Alana, Diana, let's go.
Some need that
let's do it.
support to
And
push.
some, right, and some are like, I have no idea what to do, where to start from, and you have to do baby steps.
But I'm there with alcohol right now, and I thought I could be fine with it. And I don't drink a lot, but when I drink, it's over the top, it's over the edge, to the point where I'm pushing the people that I really love away. And I'm like, okay, it's time to do something about it. And when I got invited to this thing, I was like, all right, there's a reason that it's all happening together. And you're right. You got to do the work. You got to do the work. It's true. You have to be ready.
You have to be ready for it.
I'm ready.
Don't stress it.
No,
Don't
it's
stress
all right.
it. Take it with
So
stride.
I do these little 40-day challenges, and I just started one. So no smoking, no drinking, and it's been like a week, and I feel fantastic. And I'm like, why do I do it when I feel so great when I'm not on it? And you mention all these things about the family and the temptations, and it's lunch, let's have a drink. It's dinner, let's have a drink. It's someone's birthday, let's have a drink. There's always let's go out, let's have a couple of drinks. And like you said, it's habitual, and it's a symbiotic relationship, and I'm just like, but you're all 100%. It's about work, it's about effort. So
You're introspecting now, and I think that's phenomenal. Many people are not able to introspect, and for you
Many
to say
people
this,
are not even that self-aware.
No,
This is
they're
why
not.
pushing the people that I care, because we talked about judgment. It's like, if you care what other people think, then their judgments are going to bother you.
100%.
I don't care about anyone's judgment, but when it comes to my family, it's like it's happening for a reason. Because anytime in my life something goes down, they're the ones that are the first cues. Like, hey, Mike, prasnis, wake up. And
because they can see similar patterns.
and it's like, and again, judgment. Why do they keep the score they have? Because I've messed up so many times. You know what I mean? So building
So they're
and building
still
and building.
holding that over you.
It's not them, it's me.
You're
It's
still
taking
holding that over yourself.
It's taking responsibility. I'm not holding it over myself. It's responsibility that I need to take. You know what I mean? That I think everyone else needs to take as an individual. That's why blaming other people, it can only go so far.
Right, yeah.
You gotta,
100%.
and blaming is lame. I don't like that. Take responsibility. Take
accountability.
if so, let's go. So
Michael, if you don't
I'm
mind.
so glad I met you. Like, seriously, because they're sending a therapist to my house, by the way. I've been looking for so long. It's tough. It's finding someone to trust, starting that all over again. The money.
I want to shout out
their.
they have another family member, Daniel, and he does like homeopathic. Like I love their approach because it's homeopathic. It's not all about.
holistic.
It's holistic.
It's
And he does acupuncture,
Clean.
and he can adjust your neck. I'm just saying. just shout out, shout out Danny.
Well, Michael, I wanted to get your perspective though. You just mentioned that you got off the opiates. Like, I'm wondering if that gave you insight onto like why the addictive behavior, like what was
Escape, running away, not being able to deal with myself, constantly thinking I'm not good enough because I made a bunch of mistakes, and I didn't want to deal with them. I kept running. I kept the rug, and to the point where I spoiled myself to a rot, and I couldn't. I didn't want to deal with anything. I was running.
It's easy to sit there and blame.
You're
shift.
numb.
Yeah.
It's so simple. You don't care. Nothing matters.
Right.
When you're messed up, nothing
No,
matters.
the world around you is completely dead.
And it was very easy. And then again, my family was the reason. I was like, all right, so it's not hard to approach them because they've been super supportive the whole way. But I make it really hard to support me because I'm a pain in the ass. I get it, I love you guys.
If I could just add one more thing, I think a lot of people turn to substances, obviously because, yes, they're escaping from stuff. I think what changes it from just I'm using a substance to addiction, and there are a lot of studies about this. Like there are people that just use substances. Yeah. A lot of people don't feel connection, they don't feel support, and they are in so much pain, and they are running away. And for them, it's not just a substance, a high. It's literally medicine. It's literally they cannot live with their sober state. Yeah, and they're self-medicating.
Right.
So I think that's a really important thing to understand. I think what's really healing though is when people are able to experience you actually matter. You're not just something that like a piece of trash, which some people have internalized from traumas, from past experiences, whatever it is. And they're able to like accept like, hey, somebody cares about me, they love me, that means I'm enough. When one could do that, very often there are studies that show that they're able to get over that addiction, and it's a beautiful thing. I'm hoping we can
Love
support.
is the ultimate healer.
We're gonna keep that.
Rabbis are wise, but they don't solve all your problems. Agreeers, please step forward.
And before you go ham, I think rabbis are very wise. I think it's great that we have like that support in the community when it's needed. But I think that ultimately, and what this entire topic is about, is that you need to want to do the work, which is what Ilana is always constantly talking about. You have to want to do it. And rabbis, I look at them as just like anybody else, whether it's a familial support, whether it's a friend that's there for you. It's great to have somebody like that in your corner, but that it doesn't mean that they are the go-all, be-all. It should be a completely cyclic approach to mental health, especially. And there are many different factors. So I don't see that they are, it's not like a negative addition to them helping you, but they are definitely not the go-to for everything, which some people think like, oh, go to your rabbi and they fix all your problems. No, it's absolutely not how that works.
I think also, if I may, as a person that's been to yeshiva for a very long time, where you learn after high school, I understand from a religious perspective, and the more religious you get, the more your rabbi becomes this like intermediary between God and you. So it's just really important to be respectful and understand, like, hey, these people have a very strong connection with the rabbi because they think this is like, he understand, like God is giving him whatever, like siyata dishmai ruach hakodesh to like understand what this person needs. So it's important to be sensitive. I just want to preface that. I have more to say. But,
So I want to add to
no
what
problem.
you're saying, and I completely agree with you on that statement. It is important to be respectful of someone who's a spiritual leader, a religious leader.
Or maybe anyone for that fact. Just
I'm sorry?
be respectful of everyone. For that
Oh yes,
fact.
yes, absolutely, across the board. But in what he's saying, in a lot of communities alongside ours, faith is very important. Religious acceptances and the giving of one, and also being connected to someone, like you said, who leads their flock, so to speak. It's important to have that sensitivity because for some, it's their safe haven. And we can't negate that, but we need to add ourselves as professionals and even our own experiences into the mix and let our community members feel supported by us at the same time, that we are here, we have a presence, we're able to help you. If not us, other resources, other organizations. Mental health can't just be solved by someone who has religious practices. It's not. It's fundamentally, that's not what that is. So it's togetherness that we need to focus on. It's the two that need to come together to really support our youth.
Going back to what we were saying, holistic.
It's the holistic approach. And I do biopsychosocial spiritual assessments every day. And I can tell you that all of those pieces, when we collect the data, you know, we see that it's the whole, it's embedded in there. So why negate that? We don't. We're not here to do that. Right. We want to work together, but I can tell you that many times we get pushback. We get that, you know, no, you don't know what you're saying, or you can't.
Give an example.
Before we start any type of treatment or any type of therapy, it has to be run by the rabbi. And I don't think that should be the case. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't need to get the approval and the baruch, like, thank you. That's not necessary. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's my
If I may, yeah, for sure happens. I got into a whole argument with someone one time about this exact topic. And he asked me, like, do you think that it's more productive for a person to go to a rabbi or to a therapist? This is what he asked me. So I said, listen, all things being equal, the rabbi is a great rabbi, the therapist is a great therapist. Listen, rabbis are extremely wise, get advice. I personally have
Some
rabbis,
of them are licensed social workers,
exactly,
even like that.
right.
Some of them are licensed, yeah.
And if you want someone with that religious back, yeah. But yeah, I love my rabbis. I get advice from them all the time. It's important to have somebody that you can get advice from and everything. But like, look, if somebody has a challenge that they're working with, the rabbi's not going to sit there with you an hour a day, once a week, and work on your problems and make sure, like, holding you accountable to listen to you. The rabbi's going to tell you a lot of Dvar Torahs, very inspirational things. Go apply this, and then 3 months later, maybe you'll have another meeting with him. You know?
I'll give you another example. Let's say you were sexually abused as a child, or you were physically assaulted as a young adult, or you were raped as a woman. Are you going to go to your rabbi and discuss that? Honestly. And if it's someone who's in your family, are you going to go to your local rabbi and speak about that and be comfortable?
They're not qualified for that.
They're not qualified for that. They actually are, because they run, I guess they're attached to a 501c3 or a nonprofit of their own,
and that means
as rabbis. I think that they're just, people do come and speak to them about conversations, and the rabbis are more or less directing them in a way where it's not suitable. I don't think you have the justification to help somebody in that type of situation. I've seen it. We've experienced it.
Diana, do you have any thoughts on this?
I have tons. I'm ready. So
Go ahead. Now you get the floor.
everyone got their piece? Good. So to go back on what you said, first of all, I've been in yeshiva my entire life.
No.
Been in and out of religion my entire life. Point being, what I'm trying to say is that the religious aspect, for many people, it's a part of their life. And yes, the guidance of getting the religious part of it from the rabbi is a very important piece. And like we were talking about, the holistic approach, it is very vital to make sure that every facet of the person is incorporated in their process. And if that means that there's a religious person, a religious leader that's a part of that, then it has to be incorporated. We're not saying that that's a problem on our end. There's a disconnect. The disconnect is the rabbis need to understand that it's okay that you don't know everything. It's okay that you don't have the right answers for these questions, or when these people do come to you with these problems and you happen to know their abuser, their rapist, whoever it is, whatever the case is, and now can you keep that appropriately? Can you give them the right guidance on that? No, because you don't have the tools, you don't have the knowledge, and
You're
that's
coming with a bias already.
and there's exactly,
bias.
and there's that part, the most important part. There's the bias. They're not going to give you the appropriate because they can't. I don't think that it's an intentional thing. It's just a matter of fact. How do we take this matter of fact and turn it around? There needs to be an appropriate education piece here. The awareness is that we need to make sure that the rabbis are going to be willing to sit down and have a conversation. Don't look at us as, okay, this is a female, this is a male. Put that aside. This is not about, the male and female aspect here. And we need to understand that that can't play a role every time it comes to this conversation. That needs to be put to the side. We need to sit down and talk about this where people understand that the rabbis need to learn all the aspects of it so that when they do get encountered with these kinds of conversations, who do they pick up the phone and call? Who are you referring them to? What are you suggesting them appropriately so that when they walk out of your room, the people feel confident in what it is that you're telling them, as opposed to some of the conversations that we get, and people come to us like, listen, we have this rabbi, this is the rabbi that we've been talking to, we're not going to name any names. And this is what we've been told, like maybe if we started going to shul more often and we got a little bit more makbid on our keeping our Shabbat and our kashrut laws and whatnot, listen, okay, fine if that's the advice he gave you, but that shouldn't be the only thing. That is not the only thing, and it should not be the only focus. How are we taking every single facet of this individual's life and incorporating it holistically? They need mentors and guides. And mentors and guides come in all forms and shapes and sizes. And it doesn't have to just be from a religious perspective. It's time for us to understand that we need to get together. We need to sit down and start realizing that these conversations just can't be conversations. We gotta do something about it. Stop talking about it and just moving on your merry life tomorrow, because that's not the reality of life. These people are still struggling with it once they leave your door or leave your room. They're still encountering those same exact issues. It's not going away. Whether the holistically is a very, very important approach here, and we need to understand that every single person in the community, if they hold a specific role, have to be held accountable to the fact that how are you really taking this and you're pushing this forward to the youth. Is the youth being encouraged to talk about this? Again, we're going to go back in circles because this is what it comes down to. Intergenerational traumas. How are we making sure that the rabbis know exactly where to refer these cases so that we don't end up in these kind of situations? And I'm not saying that this is a blame game. We have to remove the blame game. This isn't.
No, it should be an interdisciplinary approach.
They
Exactly.
They don't
Look,
technically
doctors,
they don't owe us anything.
Doctors,
No.
they don't owe us anything.
No.
It's like a hospital, okay? The doctors cannot do anything without the nurses. The nurses won't be able to do anything without the doctors. Everyone plays a role. Right. So way back when there was a time where the nurses had to get up and let the doctors sit because there was a respect form. Now it is not the case. Now when you work in a hospital, it's like, this is your peer. You guys are working together to help that patient, because what happened? The focus finally became the patient and not idolizing this one person who's obviously very respected and should be respected. Correct. But everyone's job is important in that 100%. Aspect. The patient is the focus. Who's carrying out those orders? This is just an analogy. This is the exact same thing. There should be an
a person-centered approach.
Yeah, the rabbi should be involved. You are not the you guys are not the enemy. No. And 100%. I really hope that this reaches the right people too, because I want the community to get stronger. That's one of the reasons why I agreed to come to the panel. I see these matters just from like a social media perspective, where people reach out just because I did some community work in the past, and then I'll refer them out to you because I know you're more equipped to handle things like that. And I just feel like these are the kinds of conversations that people need to have, and they need to listen. We can talk until we're blue in the face, but the reality is that our people need to listen, that there are resources, there is a way to help. Do not be embarrassed. There is nothing to be ashamed of. Everyone here needs therapy, does therapy, goes to therapy, recommends therapy. Mental health is something important. We all need to take care of each other and love each other.
100%. It's just as important as your physical health. It's just as important as any part of your health aspect of life. It goes hand in hand.
And mental health challenges doesn't discriminate between religious, not religious.
Absolutely
Exactly.
not.
Yeah.
Neither not.
Neither does drug addiction.
No,
Right.
no, it
Yeah,
doesn't. There's no bias.
There's no discrimination.
No.
Amen.
Call my publicist.